So Git is a tool that is pretty much runs on every platform and it's pretty widely used by developers. Personally, I use it for just my class projects. I even sometimes just like dump notes in Git repositories and like track them that way. So in case like my laptop had issues, I just use it. I probably overuse it, but I'm just that much of a fan of it. So Git is a system that's used for version control. That means it tracks changes to files in your project, or in Git land, we call them repositories. So when you have in your project, it will track the files there. And then when you make changes, it allows you to, it will track the individual changes. So then it keeps like a running history of what you've done. And the great thing about this is it's kind of like when you are building, say like normally when you're using say an art program and you make a change and then you can undo it, like you have a whole undo history. Git kind of works the same way, except it's across an entire project. So if you make a change to any file, whether it's code or art or whatever, you can, you basically have this timeline. It almost works a little like a time machine. You can just walk around in time. And this is great if, say, if you make a change to your code that breaks something, you can just like reach back and find where, like when exactly the thing broke. And then you can, so that will help you trace like what caused things to break. When did things go wrong? And usually, at least when Git was designed, it was built mainly for just handling code. There are extensions like Git LFS that let it work with art as well. We probably won't need to worry about this, but if you are a command line nerd like me, you might have to go install it yourself. But if you're at the level where you need to do that, you're probably going to be able to figure out how to do it. But if that is an issue, go ahead and ask me or someone else. We can help you with that. So Git is just a tool that keeps, like, it's by itself would just keep stuff on your computer. But it has the ability to work with, like, you can synchronize your local repository with something online, and that's where GitHub comes in. GitHub is a tool or the website that a lot of people use that you can upload or push your changes from your local computer onto the server. And then this is obviously nice when you are working with people, because then everyone has this in the cloud project that anyone can push to, and then they can clone or pull the data onto their local computer and work with it. I use it even in solo projects though, because then I have a backup that's in the cloud. And for GitHub specifically, if you're using the free version, you can have up to like a gig per project, which is usually okay. Unity projects never get that big. I will say if you are interested in Unreal, you can look into GitLab. So when you get the slides later, you'll be able to look at all these links. GitLab gives, I think, like 10 gigs for free, which is much closer to which will work much nicer for Unreal. I haven't used GitLab much outside of Unreal projects, but they're pretty much comparable, or it seems pretty much as good as GitHub. So, but for today, we'll just be using GitHub. So when using Git, there's two ways to go about actually working with Git. One way, and this is the classic way, is to use the command line interface, which is very powerful. You get all of the features of Git this way. The only problem is that's a command line interface. It's kind of clunky, and at least until you're comfortable with it, it's going to feel very clunky. You'll probably have to look up a lot of things. I still have to look up a lot of things, and this is what I normally use the command line interface. The other option, and this is what we'll be focusing on mostly for today, is a desktop client. this is usually less powerful than the command line one, but it gives you a nice visual representation of what you're doing usually, and it gives you buttons and all. It's just much easier to pick up. One thing I have noticed though, generally, like if you ask a question on like, how do I do this thing in Git, usually they give you command line instructions. So if you're looking for help, command line tends to be a little easier. But so in terms of desktop clients, there's a lot of options out there. Like you have Git, and then you have all of these things that are built on top of Git, and usually these work on whichever OS you're on, but they have different ups and downs. For today, we'll be using GitHub Desktop. Source tree is also very nice. So it's, at least when I was trying to work with it recently, I was having a few issues getting it to work. But for today, we'll be using GitHub Desktop. So first thing we're going to want to do, if you have not done so already, you're going to need to make a GitHub account. This is so to do that, I'm not actually going to make an account. I will go ahead and, so if you go to github.com, the front page just has stuff for logging in. You can use, personally, I use my personal email for this just because that's the email I'll always have. If you want to use your school email, that's fine. And then once you go through this, I forget if there's a verification email. And then also the second thing on this slide is that we do also have to get GitHub Desktop. So I will grab the link for that. It's not that one. So that is this. It is on, as you can see, it's for both Mac and for Windows. But so if you're on Linux, I mean, first of all, if you're on Linux, you probably are, I hope you'd be at least a little comfortable with command line. So when we get to that, that's a thing. Here. I guess I'll go ahead and throw this in here too. So yeah, I'd recommend you go ahead and make your account before you grab GitHub Desktop, and then once you have this, then you'll be able to just log in and let's see. Once you do log in, the first screen you see after you get into GitHub Desktop is a screen kind of like this. I think by default it's going to fill in the login or the email address you used to create your account, but I'm not really sure. For me, it auto-filled it with this users.noreply.github, this email address. And that is basically like a special alias email that says, don't, like when you do stuff on Git repositories, it attaches your email address to the commit. So if you use an actual email address, it's going to basically make your email public, which, I mean, I don't know if you like spam or not. But that's, if you do not want to get spammed by random people who've gotten your email through your repositories, using this email address. So someone's asking if you can hide the email. I don't think so, but that's why. So when you make a GitHub account, you're given this no reply email address. So if you throw that on there, then when someone looks at your commit, it will just list this as the email. And if they try emailing that, it doesn't go anywhere. So I think it's just formatted as username and then this @users.noreply.github.com. I think you can just drop that in, and then no one will spam you. Hopefully it's going to do this on. I know, like, I set up my account to do this, so it might have just done it because it noticed that I had my account set up that way. So I really don't know what it's going to do for everyone else. So, like, once you, let's see if I open GitHub Desktop. These kind of look different for. Let me clear this out. Remove and remove. Okay, so when you first have, when you first launch GitHub Desktop, it's going to look something like this. Although minus all these repositories because I have far too many. So the first thing, assuming we have a Unity project that we want to, or like maybe we're going to make a new project on Unity and we want to share that with people. So I'm going to go over to Unity Hub, and then I'm going to create a new repo or a new project. And I will just call this GitHub project. I think I have 1 and 2, so I'm going to do 3. So we'll call it GitHub project 3, and you're going to want to remember where you put it. That will become important later. So I'll go ahead and make it. And if you do already have an existing project that you want to put on GitHub, you can do that too. Just go ahead and open it. And we're going to wait and show for this. One thing to note, if you are doing a Unity project, one thing you're going to want to do is in the settings of the project, there is a setting for this under version control. We're gonna need to make it say visible meta files. Otherwise, it's going to be just much more of a hassle for your version control system or for Git to deal with. All, like inside Unity, when you have an asset that has these .meta files, and some of these settings are, or I believe what it can do is like do it in a way that's like they're binary files instead of human readable text files, and Git much prefers the human readable files. So I'm going to go ahead and check that. Let's see. I think by default it's on because it's a. Let's see. I actually should have checked this before I began the workshop because for me this is just set correctly because I've set it once and then it remembered it. I don't think it was here. I think it was in project settings. Yeah, here it is. So you would go window and then, where is it? No, actually it's in edit and then project settings, and then it will make a tab. So that would be, let's see. You want where's the version control? Oh, here we go. Okay, there's an actual tab for it now. That's different. So this will need to be set to visible meta files. I don't think these two settings were here before. Interesting. So you'll just want to make sure to go into your project and set that. And then that way we'll be sure that Git is not going to be upset with your meta files. So from once, with your project made, you can go over to GitHub Desktop, and what you will want to do is create a new repository on your hard drive. Since it is, we're making something that's new. So normally what would happen is, say, like, this is the folder where it's going to dump the repository. So like if I were to put it here, and then if I were to say, my fancy repo, which is short for repository, it will, it would make a new folder. In this case, what we want to do is we want to choose like the folder that our project is contained in. So like here you see this GitHub project 3. So wherever that is for you, and then pick select folder. So then it just shows the folder without including the project. Like if I go in here and like pick the project and then do select folder, it's going to stick the project folder in there. We don't want to do that. We specifically want to pick the folder that contains the project. Let's see, how am I? Do I need to close some programs? Am I better now? Sounds like I was lagging a bit. Okay. So what I'm going to want to do is then take the name of the project. So in this case, GitHub project 3. Whenever you called yours, you'll want that. And then dump that in. And so that will put the project inside, or it will take our existing Unity project and turn it into a Git repository. And so if you don't have Git set up, you don't really need to worry about, if you don't have Unity set up, you don't really need to worry so much about all of this. You can just, just make a folder anywhere, and you can work with that. For us Unity people, though, one thing you will need to make sure to do is in this git ignore dropdown, you're going to want to scroll way down and pick Unity. I'll explain what this is going to do in a minute, but for now, just know you're going to want to set this. This tells it it's a Unity project, and then it does certain things based around that. And we don't need to, let's go ahead and check this box. And this way it will work. Even if you don't have a Unity project, you'll have a file that you can mess with. So with all that set, we can finally create our repository. And so if you did it right, if you picked your Unity project, you are going to get a prompt that looks like this. Then if you do get this, you're going to want to say, go ahead and initialize git LFS. This is the thing I was talking about before, which lets it work with, images and things. Otherwise, it will still do your images, but it's going to, it can't it will be kind of more ugly for it to work with. This makes sure it works nicely and it doesn't bog down as your project gets bigger. So I'll go ahead and pick that. And so by default, it's going to, things are going to look kind of boring and blank. Let's see, you did not get that prompt. Okay, so if you didn't get the prompt, one thing you can still do you can still check is if you go over to history, in my case, I get all of these files. And so like someone in the chat says they don't have Unity, they're using Eclipse for Java. In that case, if you did pick your project folder correctly and you go over to your history tab, you'll see a whole bunch, all these files. And so by default, GitHub Desktop is going to add them all to your project. Okay, so if you didn't get the prompt, but you see the files, I'm a little confused about why you didn't get the prompt, but as long as you see the files, that should be good then. I'm kind of curious. This is the fresh install of GitHub Desktop, at least for me. So it shouldn't be that I have something set differently, so I'm confused. But I don't see anything here for LFS. Oh well, that's fine. If for this it's okay. We could look into that afterward. GitHub isn't updated. Okay, so if that could be like some of the stuff with the way it's behaving right now feels kind of like last time I worked with GitHub Desktop, it didn't do this. So that could be. And in that case, though, and that's something I can then, when we get to I think, yeah, I believe that was actually you had to set that up in the command line. So in that case, that would be a case where you might make the thing in GitHub Desktop, but then you still have to all around. But yeah, if you didn't get the prompt, but it's still, you have all your files listed, you're fine. We can move on. So finally then, like it will have, if everything here is good, you can just click on publish repository and it will go ahead and just, it will give you this prompt. For what we're doing, I'm gonna go ahead and make it not private so then anyone can look at it. And if you want to put a description, feel free to. This is sample project. And don't need to worry about organization. I think the name should match, but it will do that for you. And then you can publish it. So this will do what's called pushing, where like a git push, where it takes your project that's locally and then it will go and upload it to the cloud. And generally, and we'll get more into this, when you make changes, you do a push to send it up to the cloud so that now it's going to be up there. So once GitHub Desktop is done, then we can go over to GitHub. So I'm going to, if I go to, let's see, my repositories, and well, actually, let's just do, I'm going to search for, here we go, GitHub project 3. So whatever, if you go into GitHub and if you go search for your project, you should be able to find it listed here. So this is what I just made. And like, this is the description I just typed in. And then it will all be on their webpage. So, okay, so we've gone through all this trouble to make a project. Actually, before I'm going to change up the order a little bit. We went through all that trouble. Let's actually use what we made, and then we'll come back to this in a bit, because this is also useful to know, but it's much more straightforward. So when you're working with Git, there's a couple of things to, like a few general commands that are like kind of like terms, sort of. So say I guess easiest way to demonstrate this first one is I'm going to go ahead and make a change. So I will make a new script in my Unity project. If you are not using Unity, you can just like stick a file in your repo. You know, change your README, do something, and then make it so that there's something new, or just tweak something in your repo. So call this some new script. And so this will drop it in the project. And then if I hop back over to GitHub Desktop, I'm just going to start referring to it as desktop because I'm getting tired of calling it its full name. So now in the Changes tab, you'll see, at least in Unity, there's going to be a couple of changes. We have our script that we just made, and then this .meta, which this relates back to that visible meta files thing. So this is basically this is what I was talking about earlier when I was saying Git tracks changes to files. You can see what's gone on in here. So currently these files are what's known as, they're unstaged. So they are, wait, actually, hang on. Okay, that whole, never mind the unstaged thing. That's important later when we get to the command line. And it's important with some of these things. Just for now, all you need to worry about is it tracks that these files have changed. So then what you do basically to make a snapshot, or like to make a snapshot of how the project is at this moment in time, you make what's called a commit. So to make a commit, you need to give it some description. So I'm going to say added some new script. And then you can give a description. In this case, this is descriptive enough. So I will go ahead and commit. So then it's going to, so no more change, it will report no more local changes, which means that it's gotten that commit. And then if you go over to history, you can see now we have this new, what we just committed. And this is as opposed to the initial commit it made by default, which contained our whole project. So now we have this version, this commit. So we went through this trouble to make a commit, but it's all going to be kept local to our computer at the moment. Unlike if you use something like Dropbox, that will automatically sync. But unlike, this is a little different in that we have to tell it when we want to push something up to the server. So when you're using desktop, you can just use this push origin button. And then, so if I go ahead and click that, it's just going to sync and send it up to the server. And so normally if you use, when we get to command line, that would be like a couple commands to do all this. Here it's just a few buttons. So, and also before there was a thing here for that. So that is committing and pushing. We don't really need to worry about fetch. And if we have time, we'll talk a little bit about branching and merging. These are things like at first I'd recommend just working more with Git in a on your own, and then we can, you know, branching and merging is kind of its own ordeal. Let's see. So one other thing then, if I guess I will go ahead and show this. Actually, I guess before I go on, has everyone been able to push something? Like, is that okay? We get a okay. So one person's able to okay. And I guess I will go ahead and say, if you go over to the web page for your project or for your repo, and then if you reload, you can see like here it has, it'll tell you like I just committed this thing, so it that's changed 3 minutes ago. And then like if I go over to click this button for commits, you can see the same commits I had locally, and so like I can go in here and see that it shows everything that's changed. So if you need a quick reference to the websites there, I'm going to click up here to go on code, to go back. Just this main page. So one thing that is neat, and you all don't need to worry about following along with this, but like, let's say I do debug.log. I'll just like make a change to my file. Go ahead and save. So now if I go back to this, to desktop, it's going to show what's changed. So unlike something, or like that's the efficiency, and one thing that's really nice is that it tracks individual lines that have changed. So you can have your 100-line file, and then it will you can get, if you've only changed 1 or 2 lines, it will only, like, it will show you just this is what changed. So that's all it keeps track of, which makes it nice when you're trying to go back in time, you're trying to sleuth around. I'm not going to show you how to do that in this, but basically if you start using this to track a project, if you ever need to go back in time, you have the ability to do that, which is definitely handy. So I'm just going to go ahead and say I'll just go ahead and commit. And in this case, instead of using this, you can also push that way. There's multiple ways to push in this. Okay, but that's all well and good. Say you have multiple computers though, and you want to maybe you've made a change on one computer and then you want to get or I guess let's go simulate that. So if I let's say if we go to our project's webpage and let's say we want to let's go to the README and well, more convenient, I guess. In the main page, you can just click on the edit button. And then let's say, fantastic, README. So like this is something that GitHub lets you do. You can edit things like this. It's pretty minimal. You probably don't want to work with a project like this, but you can. So let's say someone makes this change. I'm going to go ahead and commit. And so now this is what our README looks like. So I've made this little commit. So even now, if I go back to the commit log, you'll see I made this update README commit here. So now if I go back in here, it's not going to actually have that update quite yet. It actually won't even know that there's an update yet. That's where this, at least in this client, you need to click on fetch to update it. So doing that, it checks the server and then it realizes, oh, something's changed. So then that's what polling is for. So when you can do that if someone else changes something and then you click poll, it goes and downloads stuff. So now if I go and check the history, I have what I did in the browser. So like so far, what we're doing is kind of silly, but this is the reason all this, like the synchronizing stuff is all manual is say I make a change and then you make a change, then as we both change things, it's not going to automatically try to synchronize them and like override each other's work. That's where like it works nicer in a group setting. It makes you control that yourself, which can be okay. Usually there are times where things get kind of messy. Say if you make a change to this README, and if I make a change to this README, and then we both try it, like I try to push and you try to push, it's not going to know how to, like we both change the same file and it's going to get confused. I'm going to it gets kind of complicated with how you handle that. I'm going to avoid going too much in depth because that gets kind of like it's something you definitely, if you work with this in a group setting, you're definitely going to need to learn how to do that. There's plenty of good guides on how to actually work through those kind of conflicts. But for now, just like know that they can happen. Sorry, I guess I was going kind of just a lot of explaining there. Does that all make sense? Does anyone have any questions? We need to make like an assistant program to Zoom with these two reactions built in. Let's see, that's an older. Let's change that. Let's see. Okay, yeah. So I guess what we'll do then is I'd say just mainly for this stuff, the best thing to do, I think, is just work with it some, like have a project of yours, whether it's just like homework for a programming class or a game project or whatever, like especially one that you're just working on by yourself, and just use Git with it. And that is how like I initially started with it. And then that gave me the time to like work with Git some and get kind of used to how that whole workflow is, because it took me, I worked with it a fair amount before I ever even jumped in a team setting. And so that meant when I did get to a team setting, I was already pretty comfortable with using it. So that's part of why I'm like avoiding getting too deep into merging and branching, because even though those are really useful, they are it's kind of, well, for one thing, it's kind of hard to demonstrate it. I would, and two, there's already a lot of resources out there for specifically handling those, and I feel like that goes like a little out of scope. But what we will do though is like everything we've done so far is with a project we've made. What if there's a project that someone else has made? Whether you just like you're working with them or you just want to download it because you want to have the project or something, we're going to go through that. So there is, if it's a project you've made, say you're getting set up on a new computer and you want to download your project, you can, in GitHub Desktop, there's this file and then clone repository. So when you're downloading a project with Git, it's called cloning. As opposed to like when pulling is when you already have the project, cloning is when you don't have it yet. So in this case, like I have a whole bunch of projects, so I could just like pick one and then clone it. But that's assuming it's on your account. Say you, let's see. Yeah, I want to get I guess I'll just use this one even though it's my own. So what you can do to clone a project is inside the repos main page, there's this button, this drop down that will give you a URL. You want to copy this and make sure specifically it's in this case. I think we'll just copy. Make sure it's like there's a couple of options here. Just make sure it's HTTPS and just copy that. Like for anyone who wants to try it on this project, I'm going to put the URL in the chat. So then with that in there, I can just click clone and it's going to go through the process of downloading this whole thing. Oh, maybe this is a little bigger than I thought it would be. No, it's fine. Okay, and so in this case, even if you're on the older version of Git or of GitHub Desktop, you should get a page or a prompt like this, because I definitely do use Git LFS with this. So it should ask you about it. If it doesn't, it might not have everything. But so then that just basically just download the whole project. So now you could go into Unity, add it, and do things with it. And this process works for anything, even if it's a non-Unity project. That's just part of how Git works. So. Okay, how is everyone doing? Everyone, like, even if you don't want to, like, if you wanted to, you could also just clone your, like, the project you just made. You don't have to use the project. You don't have to use the project that I linked to in the chat. So anything works. Has everyone been able to clone a thing? Okay, we have one pod. And like, you don't need to worry about whether, like, if you want to try opening Unity, that's fine, but you don't need to worry about that if, if Unity takes a long time to open on your end. As long as, this thing copied it and it didn't complain at you about it, then you're probably good. So we have a couple of pogs. Okay. Now this is fine. I probably should have just pumped in the slides before I started this. Well, I'm not going to worry about that during the workshop. What I will do is afterward, I'm going to look around for, I know I've seen a couple of good guides on like branching and all that. I will put that in like the workshop resources or archive. Well, I'll put that in the slides and probably somewhere on the Discord too, just because I think that's better. Like there's these interactive tutorials online that you can play around with, and I think that's probably a pretty nice introduction to how branches work. Just know that if you're going to work in a team, you will want to learn how branches work, because that is the main way you can. Essentially, what a branch is that it's like a different version of the project. So, like each branch would. It sort of has this, I'm just going to pull up a diagram. So like in your branch, you might have, originally this is your starting commit. And then as you go through the, say you make a branch and you start working in it. So this is kind of like a parallel universe. Like before I was talking about how Git is sort of like, lets you time travel. And the same way, when you make a branch, you're making it a parallel universe and you start working in your version of the project. And then other people can keep working. So like maybe these two commits are from your friend working on your project. But you can keep working while they're busy doing things. And you can be sure that what they do doesn't break your code, midway through. So you might make your branch and then you work for a while. And then when you're done building your features, so that might be a level or like character arc, whatever, then you use merge to bring it back into the main timeline. And then that way everyone has access to it. So when you work with branches, it's going to look something like this. This is usually where like the graphical programs really help, is because they can visualize how your branches work. Hopefully, if your team knows what they're doing, it doesn't look like utter spaghetti. If I had remembered it before this workshop started, I would show you a picture of some disgusting branch spaghetti because it's kind of terrifying. But I'll just have to track that down after the workshop because it is pretty funny. It also hurts me to think about it, but it's pretty funny. But yeah, one thing to keep in mind, I guess going back to this whole branching thing, say if on my version of the timeline, I update a file, and this gets a little back to this goes a little back to that whole merging conflict thing. If I'm working in something or in my own branch, and then you're working in your own branch, and say we both change the same scene in Unity, it's possible that when we try to recombine the timelines, things might not combine nicely if you're not careful. So that's originally when Trinidad put together this slide. He was addressing that. So like if you're working in a team, you'll probably want to just like when you're working on a feature, just make a scene and go work on that. And then that way, like you don't end up with issues. Like that's kind of the easiest way I can describe it, is just make sure you're working with separate things and then things won't explode when you recombine. But yeah. I guess if everyone is ready to go into like basically doing exactly what we were talking about, except in command line setting. I am, let's see, I'm not exactly sure how far we're going to get into like the nitty gritty. Just like I want to at least show this to people, because again, if you're going to work with Git that very much, there's probably going to be times where you're going to need to like pop open the lid and tinker around on get down in there and fix things and stuff. So that's what this is for. So there's a couple of ways to work with the command line interface. This is all very wordy. I'm just going to summarize this. If you're on Windows, and I believe this works on other platforms too, but there's this thing called Git Bash. And let's see. So this would be so then it would look like something like this once we have it set up. I guess I will go ahead and actually, I don't think I have this set up on my computer. Oh, I do. Okay, so I can show this. So this would get us essentially a Linux style bash. There are ways, I believe, like if you've worked, actually I haven't met anyone who's really worked with PowerShell, but I'm guessing it works there too. But that's not important. Oops, wrong. Just generally though, when you're working with Git, it's probably in some kind of Linux style terminal. You can do it with the DOS prompt, but don't do that to yourself, please. It's hard enough doing the Linux prompt. Yeah, this is actually basically just a reference. So I think I'm going to, instead of doing that, I think it would be more useful to, let me bump up the font size because this is pretty small. I don't know how well this is going to show up on a recording, so I just want to make sure it's readable. So let me go to, just a second. Actually, wait, I might be able to do this in a less messy way. I'm going to go find where the Unity project was. So, where did I put it? Here we go. This is what we just made. I thought you could do the whoa. Where'd it go? I didn't do that. What? Okay. Well, let me try that. Or let me try this. So if I copy that, paste, please. You know what? I think I'm going to use the command line I normally use. I'm sorry if this part's getting a little bit disorganized. This is something that I just like normally work with, so it's hard for me to translate it. Like normal, I think it was okay. So if you do install GitHub or Git Bash, so if you Google Git Bash, you should be able to download it and install it. I believe there's a setting that makes it to where like when you right click on a folder, there's like a Git Bash here option. For some reason, that's not on my computer, even though I have Git Bash installed. But that's what you'd want to use to go to where you're like open Git Bash, because in the command line, just like how with a file explorer, you might have, right now I'm in this CPP workshops folder, then I can double click on a folder and then go in there. In the same way, in a command line, let's see, I have like here, I have my D drive, and then I can I can, just like how in Explorer, I can double click on a folder to go into that folder. I can CD or change directory to go into folders. So I'm going to just quickly get over to my project, and then we can actually start talking about Git things again. This was CPP workshops, and then this was, we'll do GitHub project 3. So I guess just to try to highlight that parallel, let me also bump up this font a little bit. I hope that's plenty readable. For everyone trying to, read this, let me know if it's, just due to low quality, if it's hard to see. But so like right now I'm in the, okay, that's, okay. Yeah, hopefully it's, if it's good in Zoom, hopefully that means it'll be good on YouTube. But I guess we'll just have to see. So right now I'm in the D drive, and then, game projects, Unity, CPP workshops. In the same way, I'm in the same place here. So that's really all, it's the same set of folders. So I'm going to go into GitHub project 3. So now if I do ls, you'll see that it's the same, again, the same set of files. So now we're actually in this project that we've turned into a repo. So like if I do git status, it will say, okay, this isn't very informative. Like let's say I go back in here and I change this. Today is a very good day for, I don't know, staying inside. Let's be like a little pessimistic. So I've gone ahead and made my change. So if I go over to GitHub Desktop, oh wait, let's go back here. So we'll see that it says my script has changed because I made a change to it. If I go back over here now and do git status, it's going to also say this thing, or changes not staged for commit. So this is something that has a file that has changed, but unlike with the desktop client, when using the command line, you have this whole thing of like files can be staged, or they're either staged or they're not staged. And so when they're not staged, if I like try to make a commit, it will say no changes added to commit. So there's nothing staged. So it doesn't know what you want to actually include in your commit. So I do that by saying git add, and then here's like the path to the file. So I can just throw that in there. And then now if I do git status, it's gone from red to green. It says, instead of saying it's not staged for commit, it is staged for commit. And now if I do git, now if I do git commit, now we get this. This is kind of like before when we were in here and writing our, when we were writing our commit message. Now instead I'm just doing it here instead. So saying okay, I don't know. So I'll go ahead and save this. And then, so that's our little message we wrote. And so we have our commit. And so unlike in GitHub Desktop, well, first of all, it's updated. We have our commit that we just made. It's listed here. In the desktop version, you click this button to push. Here, you say git push. And then in my case, I need to enter my credentials. No, wait, that's the wrong password. Crap. Did it right. Okay, there we go. Okay, so then that is how, that is for basically use git push. In my case, I had to enter my password in again. If you use git bash, I think you can tell it to remember your password. And there's ways to, like, I have ways of, normally when I'm working with the command line, it has my password in there, so I don't need to worry about it. But yeah, that is how, basically, like, the big commands I use git add. I usually use like git add, and then that would add everything, and then followed by git commit, and then, which, I mean, I'm just going to go ahead and type all these out just to show them. And then after I've committed, I'd go push, and which I'm not going to do again because I just did. And then, before I was showing here how we would pull, here to do a pull, you just say git pull. So like all these basic commands are, at least for me, after using it a while, I can usually remember them. There are lots of reference cards on the slides. We have some, please go away. This thing, I can't read that. Wow. Oh, there we go. So this is a bit of a reference for that will be useful. I don't usually use like this git rm too often, but sometimes you need that. It doesn't mention git push or pull. I'll have to make a note of that. But like, there's plenty of references for this. In the interest of time, and also just because, oh, here we go. This is a good one. I've seen this one before. So like there's, and I'll make sure to drop a link to this in the Discord. But if you do find yourself needing to work with the command line, this has plenty of nice commands that are useful. I actually don't use most of these, but there's a lot of references out there. So even like if you, like, I suggest the easiest way to start messing with Git is to use something like GitHub Desktop or the, what was it called? The other one. One of the graphical clients. Work with it, and you'll get more comfortable with the workflow of working with Git and how that is, how things behave. And then if you ever are feeling brave and want to dive into the dark, scary world of command line, hopefully that will, you'll be a little more equipped. You'll know how Git works at a high level, and then you'll be able to start working with it in a command line sense. Okay, does anyone have any questions? Is there anything anyone wants to talk about? Yeah, let's see, what shell do I recommend? So that depends. What operating system are you? Are you on Windows? Okay, I guess I should get it out of the way really fast. If you're on a Mac, you will have a perfectly good bash. If you are on Linux, well, you have bash already. So on Windows, then it really depends. Actually, I guess I should ask, what version of Windows? Are you on Windows 10 or? Okay, so there's a couple of options. If you just want bash for Git, Git bash is plenty fine. I think that gets you, like, it's I don't think it gets you Sigwin. I think it gets you some variant of MSys or something. I forget exactly what it gets you, but that is like what this gets you is fine. There is also like what I've worked with along before using Windows 10 was this thing called Sigwin. This is it's got some like weird caveats to it, but it is pretty nice to work with. I've heard people vouch for MSys too, which I haven't used a lot myself. But again, if you use this, I believe it gets you that. But like for the most part, these aren't really running Linux. These are running like, or like not actual bash. It's running something pretty close to it. What I'm personally using is, if you've heard of WSL, which is the, not the World Surf League, Windows. There's this whole thing where you can like set up Linux inside Windows, and so that's what I'm using. Mostly because I'm a Linux nerd. I have like Ubuntu set up, so that's all running underneath the surface. And then I am using on top of that, like by default, you get like this kind of cruddy like shell thing that is, you can live with it. I prefer using this thing called extra term, which is like, it's still kind of in development, but it's getting lots of really nice features over time. So like what you see here is this sort of transparent one, but I have it set up to look kind of like the Ubuntu prompt. And I've really liked this terminal. It just has plenty of nice features, and it served me pretty well. Sorry, I didn't mean to turn that into a whole rant, but I guess short answer is I use WSL with extra term. I haven't always used this, but ever since I've gotten WSL working, this is what I've used, and I've liked it a lot. Yeah, no problem. Any other questions, whether about Git or the command line or whichever? And I guess if anyone here is interested in learning more of like learning how the command line stuff works, back at community college, I did start working on like kind of like a game of sorts that was built out of Bash, that like took this interface here and turned it into a text adventure game. Like it's a very small, minimal thing, but it kind of gets you to work with some of the basic commands. Okay, that's cool. So wait, so I take it you've worked with Linux a bit, huh? Like, if you've done that. Okay, sweet. Yeah, so that is something that I've worked on. I've built a little bit. I do like, I will say it's kind of big. It's like a gig because I took an Arch Linux VBox, so like basically an entire operating system, and like made that into a game. So it's like a gig in size, even though it's just like a simple text-based thing. But I've like, when I showed it to people back then, they generally liked it, and I'm hoping to work on it probably next semester. But if anyone here or anyone watching this afterward is curious and wants to give that a try, that might help. I'm sure there's probably other things out there too, but yeah, if anyone is intimidated by all of this, I don't blame you. It is kind of weird and foreign. It's really, I mean, personally, it's really lovely. I use it a lot, but like, you know, it's dark and spooky. But yeah, no other questions, then I guess we will end it. Oh, wait, what program am I using right now for the terminal? This is extra term. I'll drop a link to it. Like this is all all connected to WSL. So like extra term itself has no functionality. It really is just a terminal that hooks up with these other things. But if you have WSL set up, it will hook up with that, and then it will work. Yeah, and I will say, like, there have been times where things are a little buggy. I think it's mainly maintained by one person, but it is getting pretty frequent updates. Recently, I had like there was a bug where you couldn't open more than one window, and the developer at first was like, you know, it's fine. You can, it has this whole like tab system where like, you know, I can have multiple tabs in one window, but everyone was like, can we please have multiple windows? So like now you can do that. That's not unpin. I can open multiple windows. And so that was like actually a pretty quick turnaround time of, you know, like 3 or 4 people asking for it. And it's like, you know what? Yeah, that's not too hard to add. So they just went ahead and did it. So multiple windows, yay. Yeah. Yeah, and then like you even get like this. Like there's these integrations that you can have too. So like this thing where like individual command outputs are like boxed, and then I think I can like, I know you can, yeah, you can even like, if you want to, I can like get rid of these, which I don't know why you'd want to do that, but you can. I know there's things you can do with this that's kind of fancy. I don't use it that much, but yeah. Okay, well, anything else, whether, if not, then I guess we can end it off here. I do want to, something that I meant to plug more in the newsletter last week, but I wasn't able to. We will be having a game jam at the end of the month. Like it's going to run from, I believe it's, I need to double check. I think it runs from Friday to Sunday. So like right around Halloween is when it will be running. And so this is, it should, like, it's going to be mainly focused on club members. So hopefully it will be fun. We'll be announcing more related to that pretty soon. So thank you all for coming. I hope this has been useful. And if you have any other questions related to Git, just in the future or at any point, don't be afraid to ask in the just in the club Discord, because a lot of us have worked with Git a fair amount. We've all struggled with it sometimes, because as nice as it is, there's also weird little wrinkles. So yeah, hopefully this has been a helpful first dive into Git and everything related to that. So I'll just like end on that.